Okay. Well, I'm kind of maybe not even unusual case. I found it a little bit jarring at first, but not because of BAE. It was because I hadn't had a proper full-time job before. I'd had a few sort of part-time casual things in the past. And also I hadn't done any work at all for 7 months prior. So I graduated halfway through the year before I started at BAE from university. And then I went traveling and sort of, hung out for a few months. And so then I just went from nothing to full-time work, 38 hours plus reasonable overtime a week. So it's nothing to do with how BAE Systems handled, the transition of graduates into the business. I mean, I got a manager and a team of engineers and people I could ask questions whenever I wanted to. I had a graduate functional manager who's like a secondary manager who handles your transition through the graduate program. I had an assigned mentor who has been in the business maybe 5 or 6 years, so a bit younger and being a bit more approachable. I had other grads who were in my cohort. I had people who were grads from the previous cohort who I was introduced to. There was training, there were inductions, there's a whole lot of different avenues of information, almost to the point that it's overwhelming, but I think not quite. So there are systems in place for graduates coming in, and it's recognized that you don't really know what you're doing when you arrive, if that makes sense. So I'd say it was definitely manageable, and obviously it's a challenge. That should be one of the reasons why you're applying, is because you enjoy a challenge. But yeah, the only reasons why it was challenging for me was sort of brought on by myself. So yeah.
Bit of a follow-up for Brenna on that question. Ed kind of described some of the support mechanisms in place, but maybe you could talk about the different things on offer across the wider business to help new grads.
Absolutely. So I think some of the things that will really help, first one that comes to mind is flexible working. So, for new graduates who aren't used to working kind of a 38-hour week, the idea of starting at 9 till 5 could be absolutely horrible. It could be, spot on. A lot of areas of our business have the flexibility to enable you to start earlier, finish earlier, or, start later, finish later. So if you've got family or kids or other commitments, all that type of thing, we can generally accommodate that. Likewise, we're all adults. We know what's expected of us. So, people have appointments that come up, or, they need some time to adjust and that sort of thing. It's just a matter of keeping in touch with the manager, and we can normally be fairly flexible around that. As I'd mentioned, you've got your line manager, you'll have a new starter mentor who will kind of be able to support you throughout as well. And also your graduate functional manager who will oversee your 2-year graduate program. So they'll keep in the loop and make sure that you're, ready to go and feeling okay with things. Yeah, so we have a really, really broad range of roles. So engineering makes up for the bulk of that, but we also have roles in our IT department as well. And as I mentioned, enabling functions, HR and that sort of thing as well. In terms of the IT department, we look for all sorts of specialists there. So we can normally accommodate a really, really wide range of people there. So an area of interest that's always interesting for us is cybersecurity. So if people have, a degree that specialises in that, that's really good. Otherwise, any sort of IT, based experience in our IT team's really, really good. In terms of like business analysts, systems analysts, we have the team do everything, so we can normally find a home for everyone.
But probably not overseas. None of us are going overseas at the moment, but probably not overseas in your grad program at this stage. International placements is something that is being looked at in the organisation globally, so that is the future. But certainly there's a lot of work that we're doing on Joint Strike Fighter in Australia. So yes, there is a possibility that there could be work there for you. There's a lot in terms of people who work there, obviously tradespeople who do the actual maintenance, but we have engineers, we have project managers, planners, HR people, commercial people. There's a huge range of opportunities. So potentially, yes.
Absolutely. So what I'd recommend, Michael, for something like that is in your cover letter, which we do say it's optional to provide one, but it's strongly recommended. You could express that kind of interest and passion that you have for aviation, and then that's something that we're aware of up front. In terms of throughout your career, absolutely. So if we know that, we can definitely work with you to tailor your rotations around, aviation instead of, shipbuilding and that sort of thing. But it's really just about having those conversations with your manager and graduate functional manager about, that longer term goal, and then we'll help support you and work through what needs to be done to get there.
Well, I can think of one sort of overarching challenge, I guess, mainly for engineering, but maybe it applies to really anyone. It's a big company, like thousands of people, right? Which is great, right? Because it means a lot of resources, a lot of depth of experience, a lot of knowledge, and all those good things. But naturally, and I think even inevitably, you end up with processes getting a bit long or dated, or struggling to find out who does what, or basically you have sort of these two stages of this challenge. The first one is you need to recognize that if you're trying to solve a problem or get some information, the information that you need a lot of the time does already exist somewhere and someone's already done the work for you. But then the secondary challenge is learning the best ways to navigate to that information. And that's like a million things that you just have to work out just by doing them. So whether that's like finding the right person or finding the right drawing or finding the right document or going to the right URL and all those sort of things, that's something that I have struggled with and continue to struggle with so from day to day. You get better and better at it as time goes on, but that's what's come to mind for me.
I'm wishing I went first now because Ed stole a good one. I think just following on from that myself, I'm going to go next so Kathy can't steal my idea. For myself, as Ed was saying, it's a very, very large organisation. So the things, that can be difficult at times is really having a good understanding of all the ins and outs of different projects and that sort of thing. And I think it's one of those things you'll never know everything, but that's something that's quite exciting as well. So you're always learning new information. I think that's kind of a way to turn it into a positive, but it can definitely be a challenge as well. And also, so many people, you sometimes don't know who to go to, but, everyone works really well together and you can find out pretty quickly.
I think both those things are very valid. We are huge, and huge breeds great opportunities. I've been with the company for a long time, and whilst I've always worked in HR, I've worked on so many different projects in so many different types of roles, had so many different opportunities. So that's the absolute benefit of the size. But the size then can also make us quite governance driven and process driven, and that's something, a lot to do with the fact that we work in defence industry as well. That's really important for the safety of our products and the safety of our people. So if you've had a bit of experience working in a commercial, or so maybe a commercial IT organisation, coming in to BAE Systems where there's sort of layers of approval and you can only sign off up to a certain level and someone else then needs to come in over the top. That can be a little bit frustrating, but you learn to operate in that way. And so therefore you allow enough time for it. So there's a lot of process and a lot of structure, and we're quite agile. We're becoming more agile, but that is something that sometimes you think, oh, if there was no process, and as you can imagine, because we're defence, we can't just go download apps and things onto our laptops, even though if it might make us really efficient, then that might not be something we're allowed to do. So even, technology that you think would be really useful might not be allowed. And that can be a little bit frustrating, but we understand why that is.